Hi, Bernard Miller here, and in this tutorial I'm going to discuss using masks inside of Photoshop when doing your processing. Very often when you do processing on your pictures in Photoshop, you want to do something to a particular part of the picture, but not the whole picture. An example would be the galaxy you see here, M51. Suppose you wanted to do some sharpening or something on the galaxy, but you don't necessarily want to sharpen everything else. So you would want to create a mask to um, mask out everything that you don't want to affect. And the thing about masks that you need to remember when you create one is that black conceals and white reveals. And I'll show you how that works when I create a mask. So there's several different types of masks I use almost exclusively when doing my Astro image processing. The first one, I call it a lasso mask. You come up here to lasso, click on this icon, um, and then you click and hold down, and you simply draw around the object you want to capture. So in this case, I'm going to draw this right around the galaxy. So you see the marching ants, and you've created this selection here where you're selecting just the galaxy. Now normally what I do, I usually do this beforehand, but it doesn't matter. I'll come down and make a duplicate layer right here. You can do that usually before I draw the lasso around what I'm capturing. I'll make the duplicate layer, but it doesn't really matter that much. Now to create a mask, you can come up here to Layer, Layer Mask, and click Reveal Selection. And when you do that, you get this mask here. And now if you hold down the Alt key and click on this mask, you can see that black conceals and white reveals. So this mask, whatever you do to your image, will only show up in the galaxy. Everything else is being masked out because it's black. So once you have the mask, one thing you can do is right click on the mask and select this select and mask, and you'll get this popping up, and you'll get this dialog over here. And there's several useful features. The first one here is feather, so you can drag this and watch, and you can see, how it feathers it. So, I usually feather it, right about to there. The other one, sometimes you can create contrast. I use that maybe a little bit sometimes, but generally, when I create the mask, it's usually black and white, so the contrast is usually okay. If you had created something that had maybe shades of gray and you wanted to increase that contrast, you could do something like this. The shift edge, if you pull it to the left, it kind of shrinks the selection, and if you pull it to the right, it grows the selection. So I usually, somewhere right around 10%, just grow it a little bit. And once I have that, I click OK. Now I can do whatever I want now. So if I zoom in here and just, for example, bring up the curves menu by doing Control M, as in Michael, you bring this up. Now if well, first of all, I got to cancel this and select the picture. If I was selected over here, so anything I did, I would have done to the mask. I want to select the picture. And again, Control M, and if I say pull down the curve here, I can see that I'm just affecting the galaxy and not the rest of the picture. And I click OK, and if I blink this, you can see that I've kind of just brought down the intensity showing a little bit more detail in these spiral arms. This is, to my taste, just a little bit too washed out. So something like this I might do, you know, for just to bring down the intensity of the galaxy. You could do other things like sharpening. You can do filter. There's sharpen. You know, smart sharpen. There's different techniques that you can do for sharpening. That's not the focus of this, but if you do it, with this mask in place, it's only going to affect the galaxy. Now, one thing you will notice if you come over to Channels menu, you'll see the mask right here in the Channels. Now, the problem is if I come up to Layer and Flatten Image and go back to Channels, the mask is gone. So one thing you can do is when you have the mask, you can come over to the Channels and you can right click on this mask channel and click duplicate channel and then just give it a name, say Galaxy, and then just click OK or type return and you'll see the galaxy. So if I click back on the image and go to layers, now if I come over to layer and flatten image, if I come back to channels, it's still there. So I've now saved that and I can reuse it later on in the flow. So again, I suppose you get to a point now where you want to do some sharpening or something. So you can create your duplicate layer, just click and hold down and pull this down to this little plus icon. And then you can come over to the channels and you can hold down the control key and click on the galaxy, the mask, and you see it creates a selection right here. And you can again come up to layer, layer mask, reveal selection, and you have your mask back. So now you can come up to filter, sharpen, smart sharpen. You pull something like this up. Ooh. There we go. I like to have this in here. I don't know why it's affecting that over there, but again, if you zoom in here, you can play around with the amount of sharpening. You can see it's already set up. If I click and hold that, hopefully that's coming through, and then I release, that's the effect. If I blink that, you can see you're just going to bring out some more detail here, and I'm just going to click OK just to do this and come back here and zoom in. Now if I zoom in and blink this, so that's where it was and here's where it's at. And again, if you, you know, maybe that's too much, you can always come over here and maybe make this 75% or something, and you know, maybe that's better. But anyway, what I'm doing is I'm sharpening the galaxy, but you'll see I don't affect my stars. I don't introduce noise here in the background. And then if I have what I like, again, I can do layer, flatten image, and there you have it. Now, so that's the lasso mask. It works well with galaxies. It works slightly less well with nebula. You know, it's kind of nebulas just kind of fill the picture, and it's not always easy to grab a specific part. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But it works real well on galaxies because obviously it's a very noticeable thing that you'll want to isolate is the galaxy. So that's something that you can do. Now, the other thing that you can do is, suppose I'm here and I have my mask, I've created my mask, but I want to, say, do some noise reduction, and I just want to affect the background and not the galaxy, because I've just done some sharpening and I don't want to lose that. So one thing you can do is click on the mask, and you can come up to Image, Adjustments, and Invert, and if you hold down the Alt key and click in here, load selection. So now I've inverted this, And you can see that if I hold down the Alt key and click in here, now I'm selecting everything except the galaxy. The galaxy is protected. So again, I can now do some sort of noise reduction and it won't affect the galaxy. So I will just flatten this. So that's it. That's just the one thing I use is I use the lasso to just grab whatever I want to grab and then create the mask. And again, using the technique over here, I can now save this so that later on, if I want to use that mask, it'll be there. So the other type of mask that I use a lot sometimes, it's called the magic wand. So suppose I click here and I click on this magic wand tool. And up here you're going to see sample size, so you can do a point sample or a 3x3 average. I usually do one or the other. I'm going to pick a 3x3. This tolerance, if you look at this, if I click on here, you can see it created this selection. If I were to make this tolerance, oops, flatten image, what did I do? Control D, get rid of that. If I were to make this tolerance, say 10, and click, it creates a lot less. So the tolerance just how much, how many pixels that are close to my selection. So it creates an average, and then the tolerance is, I don't know if that's 10% or 30%, but anyhow, you can play with that. But the other thing is up here you can see this little check mark in contiguous. If you do that, it's only going to select again a contiguous part around this. If this were unchecked and I clicked on here, it's going to try and find pixels that are this intensity throughout the entire image. And you can see here it's selected a lot of stars when I did that. So that's the reason that I want contiguous. There may be times where you don't and times when you do. For this, I want to check contiguous. I'll click on this and I've gotten that core there. And again, I can create a mask by doing layer, layer mask, reveal selection, and I can right click on that mask, do select and mask, and you can see here it's pretty pixelated. I mean, very rough edges, so I will feather that and maybe shift edges about 10% or so and click OK. And then I'll come over to my channels and I will right click on this and say duplicate channel, and I'll call this Galaxy Core. So it's a unique name. So I'll come back here and I have this now selected, and I can again call up the curves menu with Control M, and then I can just pull down that core. It's maybe just a little bit, and when I look at this I can see, you know, from there to there I've just brought out a little bit more detail in that core, and we call that good. Say OK, layer, flatten image. Now if I come back over to channels, now I have Galaxy and Galaxy Core. The other way that I can use that magic wand is in my LRGB. I can come here and suppose I want to select this. Now you see I have contiguous there, and it just selected that. If I uncheck contiguous and select on this, it's going to select a lot of hues that are that color, that magenta. I can hold down the shift key and I can click on other shades of, you see I got quite a bit more there with that. I can click on that and add to it. So now I'm isolating my magenta colors. And again, same thing, I can do layer. Well, first of all, I like to create a duplicate and say layer, layer mask, reveal selection. Again, if I right click on that and do select and mask, again, very rough edges, so I will want to feather that a bit and then grow this about 10%, click OK. And then for something like this, I could do Control Hue to bring up the hue and saturation, and I can just pull down. If I really want to get ridiculous, you can see I can take away all those, but just suppose I want to just back off the saturation a little bit. I can now focus on that particular color. So that's another way that I use the magic wand tool to isolate those colors. And then OK, and layer, flatten image, or before I can just blink that. You can see there's, I don't know if that's coming through, but I definitely dialed back the intensity of those magentas a little bit. You can also increase the intensity or the saturation if you wanted to. So that's another way that I use that. The final one that I want to touch on, if I come back over here to my luminance, is what I call an object mask. Again, I create my duplicate. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create, there's a layer mask, and I can do a hide all. And that creates just a black mask here. So I come down and select the picture and do Control A as in alpha, Control C as in Charlie to select that. I then hold down the Alt key and click inside here, and then Control V as in Victor, and it pastes the picture in here. And then I'll follow that with Control D as in David to deselect this. Now I've got what's called an object mask. So if you look at that, these shades of gray, it's going to select the parts that are white are going to be selected. The parts that are black are going to be protected. So what I can do here is, again, with this selected, I can do Control L to bring up the layers or the levels menu. And then I take this and I just start pulling it all the way to the right. And then I take this one and bring it over to meet it. And now I've gotten the galaxy and most of the stars. Again, I can click OK. I can select and mask the same thing here, and I can feather it a bit. And maybe grow it some. Click OK. And again, I can come over to my channels, right click, duplicate channel, and I'll call this Galaxy and Stars. And click OK. Come back up here to layers, and I can do whatever I need to do, and again, it's only going to affect that. Now, as you can see here, I'm going to select the galaxy and the stars. So whatever I do, whatever technique I want to do, that's what it's going to do. So suppose I don't want the stars, I just want the galaxy. You could go back and do the, you could go back and use the lasso, just get rid of this. You could, just take this down to the trash and start over. One thing you could do, again, is you come over to the Alt, click in here, grab this lasso, and then just lasso around this object here, and then do select our image adjustments. I'm sorry, select inverse, And then once you have the inverse selected, if you come over here and make sure that the background, see here's the foreground and background colors over here, switch these so the background color is black and the foreground is white, and then just click the backspace and it turns everything black. And then you can do Control D as in David to deselect it, and now you've got something that is just, again, the galaxy. And again, you can always right click it, select and mask. Maybe you want to feather this some more, something like that, and then click OK. And that's something you can do. Yeah, again, just a little trick. I don't know if you necessarily would want to do that, but like I said, you could always drag this thing down to the trash and then just start over with the lasso if you decided, oops, I don't want the stars. So that's pretty much it. I tell you, those three masks are the type that I use almost exclusively when I'm processing my images. And this technique over here with the channels, again, once you create a mask, you can save it so that later on in your processing flow, you don't have to recreate it. You can just come over here, create your duplicate layer, come to the channels,